The ancient alien city stretched before me, a vast expanse of crumbling towers and strange geometries that defied earthly logic. I had always imagined what it might feel like to stand amid the remnants of an extinct civilization, but nothing could have prepared me for the weight of the silence. Each step I took sent echoes bouncing off smooth, metallic walls, as if the city itself were alive and observing my intrusion. I wasn't supposed to be here. My team had planned a cautious survey of this planet's orbit, but curiosity, or arrogance, had drawn me down to its surface. Alone. A faint shimmer in the atmosphere had been enough to pull me in, a glint of something beyond the ruins that tugged at instincts I couldn't fully explain. It had been reckless, yes, but the allure of discovery always outweighed caution for me. The air carried a faint electric charge, prickling my skin. As I moved deeper into the ruins, I came upon what appeared to be a central plaza. At its heart was a towering obelisk, its surface engraved with intricate symbols that seemed to pulse faintly when I approached. Despite the eerie glow, the obelisk exuded a strange warmth. I reached out instinctively, brushing my fingertips against the carvings. In that instant, the ground beneath my feet trembled. A low hum reverberated through the air, growing louder with each passing second. Lights flickered to life all around the plaza, casting the ruins in an otherworldly glow. The obelisk's pulse quickened, and I stumbled backward, heart pounding as I realized I had triggered something. Before I could process what was happening, the hum transformed into a sharp, piercing sound, an alarm. I turned to run, but my body froze. Not from fear, but because an unseen force gripped me, rooting me in place. I strained against it, but the harder I struggled, the tighter its hold became. Then I saw her. She emerged from the shadows with a fluid grace that seemed almost supernatural. She was tall, towering over me, her presence commanding and utterly alien. Her skin shimmered faintly, a silvery hue that seemed to shift with the light, and her eyes glowed with an intensity that made it impossible to look away. Her expression was unreadable, a mixture of curiosity, disdain, and something I couldn't quite place. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice resonating in my mind rather than my ears. It wasn't harsh or accusatory, but it carried an undeniable authority. I opened my mouth to respond, but no sound came out. She moved closer, studying me with those glowing eyes. There was no hostility in her movements, only an unnerving confidence that made it clear she was in complete control. Finally, the unseen force holding me in place released, and I stumbled forward, catching myself before falling. "Wait!" I managed to croak. "I didn't mean any harm." She silenced me with a look. "Do you even know what you've done?" she asked, her tone sharper now. "Do you understand the consequences of your actions?" I shook my head, my mind racing. I was just exploring. I didn't know." "You activated something that should have remained dormant," she interrupted. "Something that your kind was meant to forget." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to argue, to insist that I hadn't done anything malicious, but the weight of her gaze made it clear this wasn't the time for excuses. Instead, I tried to focus on her words, searching for any hint of what she might mean. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "And why are you?" "I am the last," she said simply. "The last of what your kind destroyed." Her words hit me like a physical blow. Destroyed? Humanity had encountered alien species before, but nothing about our history hinted at the kind of devastation she was implying. Still, her tone carried a certainty that made me question everything I thought I knew. She gestured toward the obelisk, now glowing faintly behind her. "This city, this planet, it is all that remains of a civilization far older than yours. We shared knowledge, technology, even trust with your ancestors. And they betrayed us." I stared at her, struggling to process what she was saying. Betrayal? The idea seemed impossible, but the pain in her voice was undeniable. "I don't understand," I said finally. "Why would humanity do that?" Her expression softened for a moment, a flicker of sorrow passing over her features. "Perhaps they were afraid," she said. "Or perhaps their ambition blinded them to the cost. But it doesn't matter now. What matters is that the consequences of their actions are not yet over. Before I could ask her to elaborate, she raised a hand, and a wave of energy pulsed through the air. I felt it resonate in my chest, a strange vibration that seemed to settle deep within me. Her eyes narrowed as she studied me once more. "You are different," she said, almost to herself. "You carry something unexpected." I swallowed hard, unsure what to make of her words. "What does that mean?" I asked. "Why are you holding me here?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, her glowing eyes locking onto mine. "Your kind has forgotten its past," she said finally. "But your blood remembers. And because of that, you may yet have a role to play." Her cryptic words only raised more questions, but before I could voice them, she turned and began to walk away. "Follow me," she said over her shoulder. "If you truly wish to understand, you will come willingly. If not, you will die here, just as my people did." The weight of her ultimatum was clear, and despite my fear, I knew I had no choice. I followed her into the ruins, my mind racing with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. What had humanity done to earn her hatred? And why, after all this time, was I the one she had chosen to confront? As we moved deeper into the city, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stepped into something far larger than myself. The ruins around us seemed to hum with a life of their own, and the alien woman's presence only added to the sense of unease. Whatever secrets this place held, I was about to uncover them. But at what cost? The alien woman's gaze was unyielding as she began to speak, her voice carrying the weight of millennia. She described her people, a civilization far older than humanity, thriving in a time when Earth's ancestors were little more than primitives. Her species had been explorers, scientists, and creators, venturing across the stars in search of understanding and connection. When they encountered humanity, they saw potential, raw, unshaped, but brimming with the possibility of greatness. "We chose to guide you," she said, "to teach you what it meant to thrive without destruction. We offer knowledge, tools to expand your minds and horizons. For a time, it worked. Your ancestors learned, adapted, and grew alongside us." Her voice turned bitter as she continued, recounting the moment when everything changed. Humanity's ambition had grown insatiable. They weren't content with shared knowledge or guidance, they wanted power. The partnership that once thrived devolved into distrust. Some faction of humanity betrayed their alien benefactors, stealing advanced technologies and unleashing chaos. "They feared us," she said, her tone cold. "Feared what we might become if we were not their equals. So, they turned on us. They waged a war they couldn't fully comprehend, one that cost us nearly everything. They destroyed our worlds, fractured our people, and left us with nothing but ashes." The weight of her story settled heavily in the air. The betrayal she spoke of wasn't just a historical event, it was a wound that hadn't healed. The destruction of her people wasn't merely a consequence of human ambition, it was a deliberate act born of fear and greed. I listened, stunned by the implications. If her story was true, it meant humanity's golden age of early advancement wasn't entirely our own achievement. It was built on the ruins of a species we had destroyed. The myths of gods descending from the skies, the stories of ancient knowledge lost to time, they all took on a new, sinister context. "You claim you didn't know," she continued, her eyes narrowing. "But your blood remembers. The genetic markers left behind by those we once nurtured still linger. You are proof of what was, and perhaps of what could be again." I struggled to reconcile her words with what I knew of humanity's history. How could something so monumental be forgotten? How could an entire species erase such a significant part of its past? Yet, as she spoke, I realized the answer was disturbingly simple. It was easier to forget than to confront the truth. Humanity had chosen ignorance over accountability. "You are not here by accident," she said, her voice softening slightly. "You carried the remnants of that history within you. And now you must decide what to do with it." I asked her why she hadn't confronted humanity sooner, why she had waited so long to reveal herself. Her answer was as chilling as it was logical. "I am immortal," she said. I have watched your kind rise and fall countless times. I hoped that one day, you would remember on your own, that you would seek to atone without my intervention. But that day never came. Instead, you continued to expand, to conquer, to consume without thought or consequence. Her gaze turned distant, as if she were reliving the countless years she had spent in solitude. I am the last, she said again. The only one left to bear witness to what you have done. And now, as your reach extends further into the stars, I see the same patterns emerging. You are awakening forces you cannot control, forces that may well finish what you started with us. Her words sent a chill through me. Humanity's exploration of the galaxy had always been driven by a mix of curiosity and necessity, but she framed it as something far more dangerous. She spoke of a galactic ecosystem, a delicate balance that humanity was disrupting with its unchecked expansion. In our quest to conquer the stars, we were stirring ancient threats, forces that had lain dormant for eons. I asked her what role I was meant to play in all of this, why she had singled me out. Her answer was as enigmatic as it was unsettling. You are a bridge, she said. A link between the past and the present. Within you lies the potential to restore what was lost, or to ensure it is lost forever. She explained that the genetic markers I carried weren't unique to me but were rare enough to make me significant. They were remnants of the ancient bond between her species and humanity, a bond that had been severed but not entirely erased. If those markers could be activated, they might unlock knowledge long forgotten, knowledge that could help humanity navigate the dangers ahead. But there was a catch. The process required more than just the markers in my DNA. It required my willingness to confront the truth, to accept the burden of our shared history and the responsibility it entailed. You must choose, she said. To embrace what you are and what your kind once was, or to walk away and leave the galaxy to its fate. The enormity of her words was almost too much to bear. I wanted to reject her narrative, to insist that humanity wasn't as destructive as she claimed. But deep down, I knew she wasn't entirely wrong. Our history was riddled with cycles of creation and destruction, of progress tainted by greed and fear. If her story was true, it was just another chapter in that cycle. As I stood there, grappling with the implications of her story, she looked at me with an intensity that made it clear she wasn't simply testing me, she was entrusting me with something profound. Your kind has the capacity for greatness, she said. But that greatness comes at a cost. You must learn to balance your ambition with wisdom, your power with restraint. Otherwise, you will doom not only yourselves but everything you touch. Her words hung in the air like a challenge, daring me to rise to the occasion. I didn't know if I was ready to accept that challenge, but I knew one thing for certain: the world I thought I knew would never be the same again. The tension between us was palpable as we began to work together, an uneasy truce forged out of necessity. She was driven by her mission, her voice sharp and precise as she explained what needed to be done. My task was to help her restore the ancient technology buried within the ruins, tools that would unlock the knowledge of her people and reveal the full extent of the looming threat. It was a task far beyond my expertise, yet I could feel her unspoken expectation that I rise to the challenge. As we delved into the work, I couldn't help but marvel at the complexity of the alien systems. They operated on principles entirely foreign to anything I had studied. She guided me through the intricacies, her explanations laced with a mix of impatience and reluctant respect for my ability to grasp concepts so alien. It became clear that this was no ordinary machinery. It wasn't just a repository of information. It was alive in some sense, responding to her touch with an almost organic fluidity. As hours passed, the fragments of her story began to align with the data we uncovered. Humanity's ancient betrayal had not been an isolated act of violence. It was part of a larger pattern of conflict and desperation. Her people's advanced technology had been used against them, twisted into weapons that decimated their worlds. What humanity didn't understand then, and perhaps still didn't understand, was that this act had repercussions far beyond the immediate destruction. Her people had been the stewards of a delicate balance, their technology intertwined with the fabric of the galaxy itself. When that balance was disrupted, it set off a chain reaction. What humanity had stolen wasn't just tools or weapons. It was knowledge that bound together countless civilizations and ecosystems. In their ignorance, they had unraveled something they couldn't comprehend, leaving a void that threatened to consume everything. She spoke of a specific consequence that chilled me to my core. The energy humanity had unleashed during the conflict had awakened something ancient, a force her people had kept dormant for millennia. This force wasn't a species or an empire. It was a manifestation of chaos itself, a self-sustaining anomaly that fed on destruction and entropy. Her people had called it the Void Hunger, and it was now stirring once more. "You are waking it again," she said, her voice cold with certainty. "Your species moves through the galaxy like fire through a forest, consuming without thought, leaving only ashes behind. The Void Hunger thrives in the aftermath of such destruction. It will come for you as it came for us." Her words struck a nerve, but I couldn't let her accusations stand unchallenged. "We've made mistakes," I said, "but we've also grown. We're not the same species that betrayed you. We've learned to create, to preserve, to care for what we've built." Her gaze hardened. "And yet here you are, trespassing on a world that is not yours, activating technology you do not understand. Tell me, is this the action of a species that has truly learned its lesson?" I had no answer for that. She was right, of course. My presence here was a perfect example of humanity's recklessness. And yet I couldn't believe that we were beyond redemption. I refused to accept that our potential for destruction outweighed our capacity for good. "We're not perfect," I said finally, "but we're trying. If we've failed in the past, it's because we didn't know any better. Now, with your help, maybe we can make things right." She regarded me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a slight nod, she turned back to the machinery. "Perhaps," she said, "but your words mean nothing without action." The tension between us began to ease as we focused on the task at hand. Despite our differences, there was a strange rhythm to our collaboration. She was the expert, her every movement precise and deliberate, while I brought a fresh perspective, seeing connections she had overlooked. Slowly, the ancient systems began to come alive, their once dormant circuits pulsing with light and energy. As we worked, I couldn't help but notice moments of vulnerability in her otherwise stoic demeanor. There was a loneliness in her, a deep sorrow that seemed to permeate everything she did. It wasn't just the loss of her people, it was the weight of being the last, of carrying the burden of an entire civilization's memory alone. She had spent countless lifetimes watching the galaxy move on without her, and now, for the first time in eons, she was placing her trust in someone else. The breakthrough came suddenly. A sequence of symbols appeared on one of the displays, glowing with a soft, golden light. She studied them intently, her expression shifting from guarded to something resembling hope. "It is as I feared," she said. "The Void Hunger has already begun to spread. But there is still time to contain it." She explained that the ancient technology we had reactivated was part of a network designed to stabilize the galaxy's delicate balance. With enough power, it could suppress the Void Hunger, forcing it back into dormancy. But to do so would require a massive energy source, one that could only be found in the heart of a human settlement, one of the very colonies whose reckless expansion had awakened the threat. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Humanity's actions had created the problem, and now only humanity's resources could solve it. She hesitated, as if weighing whether to trust me with this knowledge. Finally, she spoke. "If we do this, you must understand what it means. Your people will see it as an attack, an act of aggression. They will fight back, even as you save them." Her warning was clear, but I didn't falter. "If that's what it takes," I said, "then so be it. If we're going to prove that we've changed, we have to start somewhere." For the first time, a faint smile crossed her lips, though it was tinged with sadness. "You are different," she said. "Perhaps there is hope for your kind after all." Together, we prepared for what was to come. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, not just from the Void Hunger but from humanity itself. Yet, in that moment, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The choices we made here wouldn't just determine the fate of a single species or civilization. they would shape the future of the galaxy itself. And for the first time, I believed that humanity might be worthy of the second chance she was offering. The ancient machinery hummed with power, its faint glow casting long shadows across the ruins. The alien woman's focus was absolute as she guided me through the final stages of activation. This was it, the culmination of everything we had worked toward. The technology, ancient and incomprehensible, was our only chance to contain the void hunger. But success was far from certain. Even with the energy source we had identified, the system might not hold. And failure meant more than the loss of this world, it meant a cascading collapse that could engulf the galaxy. I worked as quickly as my limited understanding allowed, following her precise instructions. Every movement felt monumental, every action a gamble. She monitored the system closely, her every word laced with urgency. Once the stabilization matrix is activated, it will draw energy directly from the core. It will appear as an attack to your people, and they will respond. You must be prepared for that. Her warning was a stark reminder of the stakes. Humanity's expansion into the stars had come with military infrastructure, and any perceived threat was likely to provoke retaliation. I could already picture the chaos that would unfold if the colony's leadership misunderstood what was happening. But there was no time to dwell on it. The void hunger was already advancing, and hesitation would mean annihilation. As the final sequence initialized, the ruins around us seemed to come alive. The air grew heavier, charged with a palpable energy that made my skin crawl. The ancient systems were awakening, their purpose reigniting after millennia of dormancy. The alien woman's expression remained unreadable, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the controls. "It is starting," she said quietly. "There is no turning back now." The stabilizer began to draw power from the colony's core, just as she had predicted. In the distance, faint lights flickered on the horizon, human vessels responding to what they no doubt saw as an attack. My heart sank. There was no way to explain to them what was happening, no time to convince them of our intentions. All I could do was trust that the system would stabilize before they reached us. The machinery roared, its glow intensifying until it was almost blinding. I shielded my eyes, struggling to stay focused as the vibrations grew stronger. "It's holding," she said, though her voice was tight with strain. "For now." But the void hunger was not a passive force. As the stabilizer worked to suppress it, the anomaly fought back. The ground beneath us shook violently, and the machinery began to emit an ear-splitting screech. The alien woman's calm demeanor cracked as she adjusted the controls, her movements frantic. "It's destabilizing," she said. "We need more power." Panic threatened to overtake me, but I forced it down. I scanned the controls, looking for anything that might help. Then I saw it, a secondary conduit that could redirect additional energy into the system. "What about this?" I shouted, pointing to the conduit. Her eyes widened as she saw what I meant. "It could work," she said, "but it will overload the system. Once the void hunger is suppressed, the stabilizer will collapse. This entire site will be destroyed." I hesitated, the weight of the decision crashing down on me. If we activated the conduit, we could stop the void hunger, but it would mean sacrificing everything: the ruins, the stabilizer, and potentially ourselves. Without the stabilizer, the alien woman would lose her only connection to her people's legacy. Yet, without the conduit, we might lose everything. "There's no other way," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "We have to do it." She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, without a word, she reached for the controls and activated the conduit. The machinery surged with power, its glow turning an intense, fiery red. The vibrations grew even stronger, and I had to brace myself against the console to keep from falling. The void hunger reacted violently, its presence manifesting as a swirling, black void that seemed to devour the light around it. The stabilizer's energy lashed out, colliding with the anomaly in a dazzling display of light and shadow. The air was filled with an otherworldly roar, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "It's working," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise. "The void hunger is retreating." But the system was reaching its limit. Sparks flew from the machinery, and the ground beneath us began to crack. The alien woman's hands flew over the controls, her movements precise despite the chaos. "We need to leave," she said, her voice firm. "Now." I hesitated, my eyes lingering on the stabilizer. It was the last remnant of her people, the final piece of their legacy. Destroying it felt like another betrayal, another loss she didn't deserve. But there was no choice. The stabilizer was a means to an end, and that end was survival. We ran as the ruins began to collapse around us. The ground buckled and shifted, and I could hear the distant sound of human ships closing in. I didn't look back, didn't allow myself to think about what we were leaving behind. All that mattered was getting to safety. When we finally emerged from the ruins, the alien woman stopped and turned to face the destruction. The stabilizer was glowing brightly, its energy building to a critical point. For a moment I thought she might go back, might try to save something, anything, from the wreckage. But she didn't move. Instead, she stood there, watching as the stabilizer exploded in a brilliant burst of light. The force of the explosion knocked us to the ground, and for a moment, everything went silent. When I opened my eyes, the void hunger was gone. The stabilizer had done its job, but at a cost far greater than I had anticipated. As I sat there, struggling to catch my breath, the alien woman turned to me. Her expression was a mix of sorrow and gratitude, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You did what had to be done," she said. "Your people may never understand what you saved them from, but they are safe. For now." Her words were cold comfort. The colony's ships were still approaching, and I knew they would have questions I might not be able to answer. But as I looked at her, standing tall despite the loss of everything she had fought to preserve, I felt a strange sense of hope. Humanity had been given a second chance, a chance to learn from its mistakes and to prove that it could be more than what she had seen in us. And as we stood together, survivors of a conflict neither of us had started, I realized that the future wasn't just hers to shape. It was ours. The sound of engines roared overhead as the colony's ships arrived, their lights illuminating the ruins below. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain: the galaxy would never be the same.